November 30th, 2024 marked the 100th anniversary of the birth of a lady whose life has been a testament of resilience, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice. A lady who was unbought and unbossed, a motto that resonated with the dreams of millions and a philosophy rooted in the fierce independence of her Barbadian heritage. Hello and a very warm welcome to this special edition of My Community, Shirley Chisholm, a Barbadian legacy of courage and change.
Shirley Chisholm wasn't actually born in Barbados. She was born in New York City, but to Barbadian parents. Her father was Charles St. Hill, who born in Guyana but grew up in Barbados and migrated to New York from Barbados. Her mother was Ruby Seal, born and bred in Barbados, migrated to New York in the 1920s, like many black Barbadians of that era, in search of greater opportunities. So Shirley was born in Brooklyn, in New York City, in 1924, on the 30th of November, a birthday that she shared with Charles Duncan O'Neill, and a day that would later become Barbados's birthday, the day of our national independence. But what makes Shirley very Barbadian is that not only was she born in Brooklyn to Barbadian parents, but at a very young age, at the age of 3, her parents sent her back to Barbados to be raised in Barbados by her maternal grandmother. So Shirley actually grew up in Vauxhall, the village of Vauxhall in Christchurch.
West Indian parents at that time believed that if their children started school in Barbados, they had a jump ahead of everybody else. And there was a good reason for that belief, because we started school at Vauxhall, the Methodist Church in Vauxhall. And when we returned to America in 1934, we were here from 1928 to 1934. I was the youngest that came of 7 children came. 4 cousins, Shirley, my second sister Odessa, and myself. We were the 3 St. Hills. We were here for 6 years. And they believed firmly that if you started school in Barbados, as I said, you had a jump, because in Barbados, when you enter school, right away, you start to learn to read and write. None of this, finger painting and games and so on that you get in the States, You don't get that sort of training that we got right away until you get to about maybe in 2nd grade up there. And it proved to be true, because when we returned to the States in 34, we were way ahead of the children of our age. And in fact, I was put in the beginner's class. I was 6. And they noticed I was bored, so they put me in the 1st grade. Then they noticed I was bored, so they put me in the 3rd grade. So I skipped a few years there from, I was able to do the 3rd grade work, you see. And that's because they had the basis here where you went, when you start in Barbados, you go to school to learn your ABCs, your arithmetic, and so forth. No fooling around with paper and crayons. You came to learn, and we had a strict headmistress, famous headmistress, Miss Birch. And she was the head of that school, very stern and so on. So we started at the Methodist school there. Mm-hmm.
That location, Vauxhall, would forever become etched in the history of who Shirley Chisholm was. And why is that important? That upbringing, having gone to school at the Vauxhall Primary, led her to have the understanding of Bajan values, as it were, under a Barbadian education system. And it allowed for her to have the confidence, of course, in addition to her own values and persona. And being raised in a rural village, particularly at the time, gave her the foundation necessary to go on to become who she was.
That is where she had her formative years, between the age of 3 and 11. And in fact, if you read her autobiography, Unbought and Unbossed, she makes the point that she credits her upbringing in Barbados and the type of schooling that she had in those little village schools, the rigor of the education that she was exposed to. She credits that childhood experience with making her the kind of person that she was able to excel at college and university in the United States and go on to be a trailblazer in American politics.
The ability to hear people, feel them, understand them, having that level of empathy, and also, second of all, and importantly, the level of representation where you are fearless. Oftentimes we believe that coming from a small country can inhibit our ability to punch above our weight or speak truth to power. She had no such inhibition. And she credited her upbringing in Barbados under not just her grandmother, but the neighborhood in Vauxhall and the education system in Barbados and the wider Barbadian context.
Because I've always said in America that had I not received the basic foundations in this island in terms of discipline of body and discipline of mind, I don't know whether or not I would have emerged in America in the way that I have. It's just wonderful to be here.
And it allowed for her that when she spoke to fellow congressmen, when she spoke to senators, when she spoke to journalists who at the time were very, what we would call, ruthless, she was able to hold her own and to be able to deliver her thoughts in a fearless manner. And as I said, she credited her Barbadian upbringing of fearlessness and fairness and being firm in your pursuits as well to help her to craft that message. And what was the message? That there should be justice for all people, there should be equality for all people, and that notwithstanding your circumstance of where you were born, where you came from, your economic background, you have a voice. You have the ability to represent people. You have the ability to be at the table. And as she always said, and became a famous maxim from her, if you don't have a chair at the table, bring your own. And that is so true even today in many respects. So I think that the background of Barbados really allowed for her to have that voice and that understanding, and notwithstanding your background and your size, you have a major contribution to make.
When Shirley entered the political fray, the politics of all of the big cities, including New York City, was dominated by white politicians. So even in predominantly black communities, the representatives were, whether the local government representatives, the state congressmen, the state senators, not to talk about the national congressmen and national senators, were white politicians. And Shirley decided to challenge this, that this was not good enough, that she wanted to see black people particularly representing black communities.
The people of West Indian background, and they're all over the United States. They're in Boston, in Hartford, New York, tremendous numbers of West Indians. But they're beginning to fade into the background as these other groups come to the fore. Why? Because their large numbers mean absolutely nothing in many citizens, in many cities, because they're not citizens, and they're not on the voting rolls, and hence they're powerless to help themselves as well as powerless to field candidates of that background, so that these candidates, as they enter city councils and state legislatures and the national legislature, will have an impact on American policies that affect the countries of their birth.
When my sister came to run in Brooklyn for Congress, there had been shutting out of minorities from Congress for a long time. Nobody thought of a black woman in Congress. In fact, we had only one black senator, Senator Brooks of Massachusetts. He had been a senator in Congress. I can't even name another black person in Congress at that time. But when they redistricted New York City, and Brooklyn was realigned, and lo and behold, they got a district where the people were mainly black. And a lot of West Indians of all kinds, from Guyana, St. Vincent, you know, the family, were all here. So Shirley at that time belonged to a political club in Brooklyn, and Wesley Holder was a man who had been in politics, and for a long time he'd been dreaming of this day that he can get somebody to send to Congress. That was his ambition. So when this opening came, and Shirley belonged to the club, he approached her and asked her if she'd be interested in running for Congress. She jumped at the chance because, as I said, she majored in political science and sociology at Brooklyn College. And her political science teacher had encouraged her to go into public service because she was so good in the subject. And he noticed how at Brooklyn College she had organized black students into their own society there. So he saw these talents in her, and she liked to talk. So he encouraged her to go into public service. So when Mr. Holder asked her if she'd be interested, she jumped at the chance. And so they began plotting how they're going to, how they were going to do it.
And so she started in local politics. She started in organizing to elect black office holders in the state government of New York City, and of the state of New York. And it was at that level that they began to organize. Independent black political organization in New York, and specifically in Brooklyn. And in 1964, Shirley's great breakthrough came. One of the state assembly seats opened up in the 12th district of Brooklyn, and Shirley threw her hat in the ring. And of course, she had to go up against all of the discrimination based on the fact that she was black, that she was a woman, that she was of West Indian ancestry, but she went to work. She built her own independent campaign under the slogan, "Fighting Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed." And that was her attitude, that she only answered to the people, that no millionaire class controlled her, paid for her, that not even the establishment of the Democratic Party that she associated with, they did not control her either, that she spoke for the people, unbought and unbossed. And so she was successful. She won a seat in the New York State Assembly as a congressperson for Brooklyn. And she served in the New York State Assembly for 4 years before the Brooklyn, the congressional seat to the National Congress in Washington, D.C. opened up. And once again, Shirley said, "I am in. I'm a candidate."
She and my father often discussed politics because he was very interested in politics. He was a fan of Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was his hero at that time. And they would discuss the political life, and we were bystanders as black people in America at the time. We were bystanders to the whole process, okay? They may have been a good many black people who voted in the North, but in the South you couldn't vote because they'll burn your house, they'll kill you, they'll do this and that. So forget about that in the South. But I'm not saying many black people voted even in the North because we were outside, we were spectators at American life, you know. We were people who had to wait for, how can you put it? We had to wait for the droppings from the master's table, that sort of thing.
Now, when people ask who Shirley Chisholm was, I often say to them, she was not just the first person to be elected to Congress in the United States who was a black woman. But in addition to the fact that also she was the first person to run for president of the United States as a black woman as well, she was a woman who had a confidence about her, underscored by Barbadian values. And that is why it's so important, this story, in my view, that this country can continue to produce an environment that allows for whoever passes through its shores, as it were, to go on to lead in different spheres of endeavor in the world. Now, her journey was one that, if you watch her documentary, it gives you a snapshot, quite remarkable in a number of areas. Because why? You get to see her background, her upbringing, and the challenges that she had to overcome in circumstances where it was even more difficult than it is oftentimes now for women in elective politics. In a country, of course, that has a lot of history, as we know, that it wasn't always the best or the easiest, but she overcame. And that is really why I think it's so important that the story of Shirley Chisholm should be told, not just here in Barbados or across the Caribbean, but the world.
She went up against a civil rights lion, James Forman, who had been chairman of the Congress for Racial Equality, a giant who rubbed shoulders with Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael, a giant in the civil rights movement, who had been embraced by the Republican Party and was very well financed. And once again, Shirley did not have the support, the real support and backing of the Democratic establishment. She virtually had to run her campaign herself. But again, it was fighting Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed. And she prevailed once again. So she went into the US Congress in 1968, and she immediately distinguished herself, opposing the Vietnam War, fighting for resources for inner city communities, jobs for the people, better housing conditions, better schools and better education for the inner city slum dwellers of Brooklyn and other similar communities. She also took on the women's struggle, fighting for equal rights for all women. She took on the abortion issue, arguing that women had to be given reproductive rights over their own body, and that too many women were dying from botched, illegal abortions in some, illegal backroom medical facility. And so this was Shirley Chisholm, fighting for young people. She described herself as a militant, as a radical. She said she could not be a moderate. She denounced the prevailing political system in the United States, where congressmen and senators were beholden to the millionaire class, to the business class, that refused to take positions based on conscience and values and a belief in what they were saying. And that was not Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm refused to be silenced. She refused to be bought off. She refused simply to toe the party line.
I knew she was running for a seat in Congress, but I never followed the ins and outs. So that the day she won, and it was in the New York Times, a picture of her, the celebrations at the club, I said, well, she did win. When I went in, the boss called me and says, do you know this lady? I said, yeah, that's my sister. Because she looks so much alike, there was a funny thing, when she got married, I got a lot of congratulations. Well, people used to mix this up. And he said, she's in Congress. I said, she's what? I didn't even realize the ins and outs, you know, but she won her run, and she became the first black woman to sit in the American Congress. But I was very proud. I was very happy for her. I knew it was her ambition to do something like that. She always wanted to broaden her horizons, you see, get out in the world. She always wanted to be in the middle of these things. And she had a love for politics, and I think she saw it as a way of improving the lot of the people around her. Because in Congress, she did a lot of good work. For instance, you know, we have the NIS here, National Insurance. In the States at that time, if you were a house worker, you know, you went out to work and it was women, they were not covered by any kind of Social Security or anything. They had nothing. And Shirley put up a bill and got it through Congress, so that from that time on, house workers in America are covered by Social Security. I'm very proud of her for doing that. Then later on, she put up another bill to provide money to underprivileged students in college who were having a hard time. You know, you had to buy your books and everything. And she put up a bill for them to get some kind of subsidy, and that passed. So that was another good thing she did. She did some good work in Congress. Mm-hmm.
She said that that business, that status quo-oriented business as usual politics was destroying the nation. And she was determined to challenge it and to bring something new to the political system in the United States. And so, once again, fighting Shirley Chisholm, she went up against all those powerful forces. And, you know, she complained that that to some extent even her black fellow congressmen did not support her because they were already too beholden to the Democratic Party establishment. And she also felt that she suffered from male chauvinism, that they were resentful towards her because she was a black woman. So once again, she went up against the odds, but she fought a very good and valiant campaign. And she actually went to the nominating convention with a significant number of delegates. And so even though she didn't win the nomination, the important thing is that she had become a very important pioneer. She had set a precedent. She had said that a woman can legitimately and seriously contend for the highest office in the land. She had also said that a black person, an African American, could also legitimately and seriously contend for the highest office in the land. And she said that in doing so, you did not have to be a client of big business interests or the big political establishment. You could be your own man or woman. Right? You could be a voice for the people. And that is the importance of Shirley Chisholm.
Of course, she shattered a number of ceilings. As I mentioned, she was the first person to run for president of the United States that was a black woman, of course. Well, a black person and a woman. And the first female to be elected to, black female to be elected to Congress. But in addition to that, her legacy is beyond those two things. In my view, she created a space where marginal groups had the ability to say, if Shirley can do it, Shirley Chisholm can do it, we can do it. You look, for example, at Hillary Clinton, who throughout her career, particularly at the time also when she was running for office, referenced her. President Obama, when he was president, one of the things that he did before she passed was also give her one of the presidential honors as well. Because why? She would have crafted a legacy that allowed for many generations of politicians and Americans generally to be able to say, notwithstanding, as I said, notwithstanding the circumstance in which I came from, here is what I have to offer, and no one is going to stop me from doing so. And to this day, when you drive through different parts of New York City, and in particular in Brooklyn, you see different community centers named after her. Of course, that was the area that she both lived and ran for. And it speaks, therefore, to the tangible legacy that she would have left in the United States. So not just New York, but of course on the national level.
Her name is on the post office next to the junior high school we went to. The post office is the Shirley Chisholm post office now. Her name is on the tallest building in Brooklyn. Used to be a bank. Her name is on that now, and her picture is at Borough Hall, the administrative center of Brooklyn. The picture is there. So she has been dotted around the place, you know. But in Barbados, I would like her to be remembered as a child of Bajan parents who got her real fundamental start in this little island, gave her enough of a head start in education and a respect for education.
Shirley Chisholm should be considered a great Barbadian heroine. And Shirley Chisholm's autobiography, Unbought and Unbossed, should be reprinted, should be in the bookshops of Barbados, and probably should even be on the school curriculum of Barbados. Not only is it a good introduction to the life of an outstanding Barbadian woman, but the philosophy of Shirley Chisholm is outlined in that book. Her insights, her value system, the agenda of political struggle that she had set for herself. And the young people of Barbados could only benefit from a reading of Unbought and Unbossed.
Well, a couple of years ago, the government of Barbados changed what was then the Vauxhall Primary School to what is now called the Shirley Chisholm Primary School in Vauxhall. And that has become a major legacy in Barbados in terms of our celebration for her, of course. Because why? It becomes a tangible symbol and a remembrance of who she is. And every day hear it in the media. Because why? Whenever the school is playing or being represented in any way, shape or form, her name is being echoed in society. But in addition to that, the government now has dedicated an entire year of celebrations for Shirley Chisholm. You would have seen different competitions coming up. You would see different things in terms of music, different events being held. And I think that is a true testament of the appreciation that the country has for her. Prime Minister Morley has gone on record a number of times in expressing her profound gratitude as well in her own journey with respect to how Shirley Chisholm would have impacted her own life as a young woman coming up in Barbados, and using her as a reference in many respects for inspiration. And I've always said it's incredible that Shirley Chisholm's birthday, November 30th, is Barbados's Independence Day. And of course, this year would have been 100 years that she would have been born. And I think it therefore is a very important time. That's why the government and the country is also celebrating her legacy in this year, so that people can remember who she was, the contribution she's made, and the importance, therefore, for generation today and generations going forward.
And so, as we honor Shirley Chisholm on this, the centenary of her birth, may we continue to reflect on how her legacy inspires us as Barbadians, how her story reminds us that no matter where we are in this world, our island's spirit of determination and innovation can break boundaries, transform lives, and shape the future. Shirley Chisholm, a Barbadian legacy of courage and change. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been a special edition of My Community. Be good to yourself and look out for the interests of your neighbors.